Hi, it's Abby Kadabi here, and today I'm going to be talking about the optional alphabet plugins that you can purchase. This is an additional cost above the cost of basic Embird, and you can purchase these fonts either through embird.net, or there are different websites that are um, licensed to sell Embird products, and they sometimes offer the fonts at a reduced price. And several years ago, Embird started combining their fonts into font packages. So if you want to buy a package, it's usually a little more economical to do it that way. So let's go ahead and click on the Embird program to get it started. And to access your different texts that you have purchased, you can either go to the A for alphabet here and insert text, or you can go to your insert tab and click text. And then this window opens up and it's telling me that I'm on alphabet 2. It also says that right here. There's three different tabs here. This is the insert tab where you're going to insert your text. This is the properties tab where you can adjust the size and make some other changes to maybe the underlay, or you can make adjustments to pole compensation or um, different things like that. And then in layout, you can, since I don't have a text here, you can adjust the spacing of your letters. So uh, I'm going to demonstrate with this ABC font, but before I do that, um, if you decide you want to purchase a text, if you haven't purchased any, and you come to this text, they will all this drop down box, they will all look like font number 11 here. They will all have red X's across the A, B, and C. If I decided I wanted to purchase font 11, I would purchase it, and then I would receive an email with a registration number. And come here and I on alphabet 11, I would enter that registration number on this line here and click register, and then all the red X's will disappear. So I'm going to go back up to font number 2. And so this is my text line, and it's kind of hard to see. There's not a lot of color delineation between the gray and the white, but I'm going to type in the capital letter A, B, and C. And so then the next thing I have to decide to choose from is how I want my letters to be connected. So I'm going to come to this drop down caret here, and I have my choice of floating stitches solid, and running stitches nearest point. So I'm going to demonstrate floating stitches, and now it's asking me, do I want the floating stitches to be connected at the nearest point? And that's probably what I would want because it's going to create the smallest connection. Or you can unclick that and then it will maybe connect at a different spot, which may be a little easier to trim away, but that's your choice. So I'm going to leave nearest point and click OK. And so it brings it into my window. And so when I look at this, it looks like it's one object because the selection box is around all three letters. But if I look at my objects order panel, I see that I actually have 3 objects here, and there's a selection box around each letter. That's that little black square outline around each letter. And so if I deselect my selection box by clicking outside the box and I come up to my objects order panel, now I have a selection box just around the A, and I can move the A independently of the B, and the C. So all my letters are separated and I could put them in any order that I want if I actually like misspelled my word or something. So that is just floating stitches nearest point. The next is text, and it's floating stitches solid. So I'm going to use the same A, B, and C, and I'm going to click OK. And so again, it came in on my work table looking exactly the same as the first one with the selection box around all 3 letters. But when I look in my objects order panel, I only have one object. And so, there's one selection box around around the A, B, and C. So if I wanted to move this, it moves as a group, and I cannot move the letters independently from one another. And the third choice is to do a running stitch between your letters at the nearest point. And so I'm going to bring those in. And again, it brings it in as a group, so one object. And so I'm going to bring that up close to here, and then I'm going to zoom in. And so the difference here is that these three letters are connected by a jump stitch, and you don't see it, whereas this one is connected by a running stitch, and you do see it. So if I go to normal mode in my tabs here on the bottom, then I can scroll in, and you'll see that I have this dotted line connecting my A to my B and my B to my C. And so that is representing a jump stitch. Whereas here I have a solid line that connects my A to my B and my B to my C. So and usually I do work in the normal mode tab, but if I was confused and I saw a line that was connecting something and I couldn't remember what it is, I could go to my 3D mat, and if I turn it off, jump stitches disappear in 3D mat, whereas running stitches will remain. So if you're in 3D mat or 3D or even in 1-to-1, you will see the jump stitches. So I wanted to demonstrate the difference here with 3D mat. It remains at your zoomed in level, whereas 1-to-1 mat, it takes it back to a 1-to-1 view. So the next thing I wanted to discuss under text is this properties panel, and Embird uses the default of 25%. So all of these fonts that I just loaded were loaded at 25% for both the width and the height, and that's because keep aspect ratio is checked. If I decided I wanted to just change the height of my letters but not the width, then I could uncheck keep ratio, and I could increase my height, and I'll increase it up to 40%. And you see my width stayed at 25%. It didn't change. So if I click OK, then my letters came in much taller, but they're the same width as all of these other letters. So that's a way of getting a different look or a different size to your text. The next thing under properties, you can change the density of your letters. So if you wanted your letters to look more like a sketch design rather than a satin stitch, you could increase the density. And remember, the higher the number, the fewer the stitches. And so I can click on the number and I can put in 12. And then I want to come and uh, remove my underlay, because if I'm doing a sketch design, I don't want underlay. So I'm going to click that. And so I'm going to say OK. And so then you can see the difference in the density of the letters. And if I zoom in, you don't see any underlay. And so that would not detract from how my design looks. Looks like there's a running stitch that's going from there, but I can't remove that. So, maybe I could remove that because I think I left my connection type at running stitch. So if I change this to floating stitch solid and went back to properties and it remembered what I had, then I click OK. And so here's my example of floating stitch. It really didn't change it any because it has to make a connection somewhere. And so I still have that running stitch there. So the next thing I wanted to demonstrate, I'm going to delete most of these. Let's say you were working on a project and you made these changes, and a month later you came back to your project and maybe you wanted to add on to it and you wanted to use the exact same font with the exact same settings, and you can't remember what you did when you did your project originally. you could have come to the text mode, and you have these two buttons here, and one looks like a floppy disk, and when you click on Save Lettering Object, you click on that, and then you can select whatever folder and subfolder you want to save it in. Usually I save it in the same project folder as that I had been working on, and so I'm going to call this ABC. And so it's going to create what's called a lettering file. It's a .ltg file, and it's going to put it in my fish tropical folder file. And so I'm going to click save. So then if I close this out and I delete this, and let's say it's 2 months later, and I'm like, oh, I need to use that same setup. I want to add to this, project that I was doing. I can come to text, and then I can open my lettering file, and I can go to my tropical fish folder, and there's my abc.ltg file. So check the file name and try again. There it is. Okay, so it brings it in my layout page, but I can go back to my insert and I could change this to DEF. And so it's going to remember my properties that my width was 25 and my height was 40, and that I changed my density to 12. And so I could click OK. And so now I have my letters for maybe a different name in the exact same font with the same setup. So that's how you can save your um, lettering for a project. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to go back to insert, and I'm going to do text, and I'm going to go back to properties, and I'm going to reduce my density back down to 4, and I'm going to put my edge walk back, and I'm going to change my height back to 25, and I only had to type the 2 because Embird likes to put in um, numbers. And so then I'm going to go to my layout tab. And so this looks okay. I don't seem to have a problem here. But if I choose a different font, let's say, I choose maybe this font here. And that's not the one I meant to choose, sorry. Want that one right there. And so this has a lot more curly cues and stuff on it. So I'm not, let's say, um, I don't change anything here. Let's see what happens. And so I can see that my E and my F, I think, are too close together. And so if I click on the little button in front of the F, and if I zoom in, maybe you can see better, this little red button here, then I can move my F away. And it's also showing that this F is extending below the baseline. That's how it's programmed, and maybe I don't like that. So I could move the letter up by clicking on this little green, and I can put it right on the baseline if I want. So I can do a lot of editing to this design. So I could move if I grab it, I can move the E up, and I could do the same with the D. And I think the D looks too small in comparison to the D and the F. So I could increase the size of the D by, I think it's this button here, and I can, no, this one rotates, I think. Yeah, that one rotates. That just moves it up and down. And I think this one, yeah, that one rotates. That one rotates. There's one where you can increase, oh, there we go. I can increase the size. So you can just play around with the different buttons until you find the one that you want. As I said, I could made this, I could angle it differently if I wanted to. And I just have to go by small increments. It's kind of finicky. And so then I could stretch my letters out if I wanted to do that. And I could make changes. So if I was happy with that, then I could click OK, and so then my letters would come in. So you can play a lot with the spacing and the sizing of your letters. Also under text, I'm going to go back to the other ABC, and it's still at 25. So I'm going to do my layout, and it remembered all those changes that I made. And so I think the best way I know to get it back to the default is just to close the program and then reopen it back up. And so now I'm going to put my ABC back here. It was going to be too much work to try to, and so now they're all nicely on the baseline. And so right now I know my baseline is a line. I'm going to go back to insert, and I'm going to add a few more letters here. And so I'm going to click OK. So now I didn't mean to click OK. So I'm going to delete that. And so I meant to click on layout. And so they're on the baseline. And so now I can choose to put my letters in a circle, and I can change the width of my circle. So that will change the arc. And so right now it's set at 170, and I could change this down to 90 if I wanted. And so then my letters are on a much sharper degree or radius. And so if I can tell right now that my letters aren't centered on this radius, so I can click on this black dot in front of the A, and I can nudge them around until they look, and I try to look at the most outer point of each letter. And if I was happy with that, I could click OK, and then my letters come in as an arc. And so that's one way. You can also adjust the layout here. So if I thought my letters were too far apart, I could adjust how far apart they are without having to move each individual letter. And that's done by gap. And so I would click the down arrow, and it makes the letters move closer together. But then now my A is not across from my J. So again, I would have to move that, and it's just kind of eyeballing it to see what looks about equal. So I click OK. And so now you can see that this is the new design up here, and the letters are slightly smaller in the arc. It's a little smaller arc. And you can also put the letters on the inside of the circle. So if you were trying to make a patch that you didn't want the letters on the outside of the circle because they would on the bottom because they would be upside down, you could click place on the other side. And so now it's on the inside of the circle. And again, I would take my A and rotate it down to the bottom of the circle. And so now you can see that all my letters are overlapping one another, and that's because this radius is much sharper on the inside of this circle than it is on the outside. The letters are kind of expanding on the outside, whereas now they're converging on the inside. So I'm going to have to increase my gap between my letters. So again, I'm going to just keep clicking this gap until I see that the letters are all kind of moving apart. They're still touching. I want space between my letters. So I'm going to say that looks pretty good there. And so now I need to move my A back so that, and so that's okay. But this I, it just seems to be a problem because it's so close to the H, and my A and my B are too far apart. So I'm going to take my B and I'm going to move it closer to my A, and I'll move my C in a little bit. And then this I think I'm going to angle it just a hair so the top is away from the H. So, and maybe the same with this F, just a little bit because it's on top of, and maybe I'll move my G away just, and when I move the G, it's going to move all the other letters behind it. So if I was happy with this, and I'm pretty close as far as being even, and so I'm going to click OK, and so it brings it in, and let me so here was my for my lower, and as you can see, it's a much sharper angle, so you can't use the same diameter for making it a circle on the inner versus the outer. So I'm going to delete this one, and this is kind of trial and error. So I'm going to go to text, and I'm going to go to layout, and so my width, I'm going to change to, I'm going to try 110, and so it hopefully will have remembered my spacing, and that looks fairly close. So I'm going to click OK, and so now my circle looks much better. And so that's how you can get make maybe a patch or something by using that circle. And so the next thing I wanted to show you was you have other options besides circle. You can put your letters on a wave. And so right now I need to unclick place on the other side. And so again, it kind of especially down here, it jumbled it up to the H, I, and J. So I'm going to move my C down the line here, and then I'll move my D. And so now my letter, and I need to make my line longer. So I'm going to make my line 125. So now it still needs to be longer. So I make it 135. So now all my letters are fitting on there better. And so you can have your letters on a wave, which might be a fun way to do a design. Or you can have it, there's a second wave. So you can change it so it um, this D here is because it's on the inside of this curve. It needs to move out. So this is C. So you can just play with this and move letters. And so, and now I'm moving my H back, and you can see how I'm moving the different letters. And so I would click OK. And so that's how that one would look. And then the other options that you have under text, and I'm going to get rid of some of these letters because this is more for like maybe making monograms. And so you come to layout, and I'm going to select line again, and now I have this envelope feature here. So if I click on envelope and I click this down arrow, it gives me all sorts of different envelopes to choose from. So I could click this one, and it changes all my letters to look italicized. And I could have put them closer together in my layout panel. And so I have a reverse, and so I could have them that way, and I'll move them a little closer together and click OK. And so you can see the difference and how that looks. And then you have, I think you have an ellipse. And so then you can, let me zoom in a little bit. And so you can change how this ellipse looks by using these little handles here. And so you can make it bigger like that, or you can make it narrower if you don't want it so big. You can still adjust the spacing of, this is just moving it down the line. Oh, I need to move the B. And so I can move my B and my C closer. And so um, that's kind of, and then that's how that looks. And if I thought that was too squatty looking, which I do think it looks, then I can move these handles, and I'll make it a little more round looking. And so that's how it would look if I made it more round. And other options I have, you can make kind of like a 3D effect, and I'll just leave it like that. And so it gives kind of a 3D look. And you can adjust all of these by moving the little handles. So if I wanted to make this um, so I could bring the sides out, and so it just makes the C, A, and the B more pronounced. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the envelope feature, and I was looking to see, oh, there's like there's a diamond, and that's kind of a popular font setup. So have the, oops. So you can play with that and move your letters around. So there's just a lot of lots of options for these fonts. And when you change the size, it's not like when you change the size of a design, there's no 20% rule because the program automatically recalculates for all the stitches. And so you can, it says you can open a background image here, you can rotate it, you can do an undo, redo, you can zoom, or you can zoom the way I do with my mouse. So there's just a lot of different options that you can choose. Um, so I thought this one was kind of neat. I'm just going to say okay to that. And so it gives you a flat top monogram with a curve, and then there was the reverse. So these are just a lot of different examples of how you can use the envelope feature and you can also save this setup by using the Save Lettering project. You have these options on each one of these tabs. And so you can also change your connection points here. And so that's pretty much how this works. And so it's just kind of fun to play with until you get the hang of it. I did want to show you one other thing that I kind of skipped over. So if I go to text and I go back to my properties window, um, I can change the angle of this font. So if I do angle and click on it, I could type in, I want it 15 degrees. And so it will, oh, it's still on. Sorry, I need to go back. I'm still on envelope. I need to turn that off. And so now it's showing me my 15-degree lettering. And so um, that's how my letters would turn out if I did 15 degrees. And so then I'll show you, you can do text, and I'm going to go to properties again, and I'm going to put my angle back at 0, but I can just change the degree of one letter. And right now, oh, I don't know why these didn't change. So I'm going to put them all back to 0. And so maybe I just want my A to be angled, and I'll make that 20 degrees, but I'm leaving B and C at 0. This changes all the letters here, and here you can just change one letter individually. So I could, and so then just my A is angled. And then you can also adjust the density of a letter here. So if you want to have a different density on one letter versus all the letters, so if you change the density over here, it changes all the letters, where here, where it says DNST, so you're going right here where it says DNST, that's where you can just change one letter. This density changes the density of the underlay, and I really don't think I've ever used that. So if I wanted to put my angle back at 0, and I wanted to change the density of the A, and I'll make it 11, and I'm going to remove the underlay. So then you can see here the difference between the A and the B. This is a solid satin stitch where this is closer to a sketch design. So that pretty much covers using the built-in text that you can purchase through Embird. I hope you gain some information from this video, and my next video will be on editing designs.